Welcome back to Let's Get Haunted with your hosts,
Nat Strawn
and Allie. Welcome back, Haunties, to episode 215 of Let's Get Haunted. We are your hosts, Nat and Allie, and we're here to get you spooked, to be quite honest with you.
Yep. We are here to help you realize that your life is actually a lot better than you thought it was before you started listening to this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a doozy for you today about somebody whose life I would not swap the world for. So actually, it's very, very fitting. Is there any housekeeping that I'm not thinking of before we get started?
Girl, my past 3 days have been psycho. You know this. You guys, I had to go to the emergency room the other day. It's like a whole thing. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin, where to end, whatever. I've noticed a lot in the comments. People are like, Nat, you're such a good mom. Wow, you are killing it. I want you guys to know that I was not, in fact, killing it. And I had to take my newborn to the ER yesterday. Yeah, it was a terrible day. Luckily, he's fine. But basically what happened was I was trying to do tummy time with him on this little triangle shaped pillow that I always do. But I'm still healing from my birth. So I can't hold the baby and sit down crisscross applesauce. So I put the baby down first. And I was so worried about him falling forward off the pillow that I didn't even think about him falling backwards because he's never moved that way. But apparently his back muscles just turned on and he fell backwards and hit his head on the molding that's on the floor that goes around. Yeah, and started crying and he had a big bump on his head and I was like, oh my God, this is the only thing you're not supposed to do is drop the baby or have the baby hit their head, right? That's the one thing you're not supposed to do. And my babysitter had just showed up and she was like, it's fine, but we should go to the emergency room. And everyone was like, it's fine, don't worry, everything's cool, but we need to be in the emergency room. And I was like, are you guys sure? Because I'm self-pay, my insurance sucks, so I don't want to take risks if I don't have to, but also I'm pretty sure they're going to take my baby away because this is an unfit mother bringing the baby into the emergency room, sorry, he fell and hit his head. It ended up being fine. We got an MRI from him. He was fine. Everything was A-okay. But if there is anybody out there who is struggling today, trying to keep all of the balls up in the air, it's okay. Sometimes we drop the ball. Sometimes we drop the baby. Nobody's perfect. We all got to work it again and again and again, as Hannah Montana said.
Well, I'm very glad that Milo's okay. I'm glad that you're okay, and better safe than sorry, So I'm glad that you went in because otherwise I'm sure you just would have been panicking.
Yeah, well, I called my father-in-law because he was a pediatrician and I was like, hey, here's a picture of this bump on his head. He hit his head, he cried. And my father-in-law was like, well, that's really close to where the skull closes because newborns, their skull has a bunch of different pieces, puzzle pieces that go together. And he's like, that's really close to one of those soft spots. And I was like, oh no, my heart just dropped out of my ass. And he was like, you should definitely take him to the emergency room. And then when I got to the emergency room, the doctor is like, it really doesn't seem anything's wrong, but this is a 100% emergency and we need to do an MRI on them. And I was like, okay. So I did the MRI, but everything's fine. We're all good. And now we're ready to get haunted in a different way.
Well, there's a personal haunting for you guys. We haven't had a personal haunting on the public episodes in quite some time. So there's your little daily dose of reality about what it's like to be a newborn mother.
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. Here we go. Born in 1877 to a middle-class banking family, over the first 5 decades of his life, Belgian financier Alfred Loewenstein would grow to become the third wealthiest man in the world. By the time the roaring 20s rolled around, Alfred seemed to have everything going for him. A successful business, a beautiful wife, a healthy baby boy, and a sparkling international reputation as the guy that heads of state would go to if they needed investment advice. So when Alfred boarded his private plane on July 4th, 1928, for a short flight from London to Brussels, nothing seemed amiss. However, by the time the plane landed, the Lowenstein family would be embroiled in an international scandal, the likes of which had never been seen before. Somewhere along the 1.5-hour flight, Alfred would go missing from his plane after excusing himself to use the restroom, leaving behind a mystery as twisted and shadowy as his years of business dealings. Was Alfred murdered? Did he commit suicide? Did he fall victim to a tragic accident? Or did he somehow escape to start a new life elsewhere? Welcome aboard LGH's Haunted Airlines, and be sure to buckle the fuck up as we try our very best to make it through one very turbulent journey to unravel the mysterious disappearance of Alfred Loewenstein.
All right, hold on. He had a private plane in 1920. What year was that you said that he was flying from London to Brussels?
1928.
Didn't they like invent flying like in a couple days before that? Like, what do you mean he had a private plane?
Yes, that is how wealthy he was. And I'm going to be referring to him as a millionaire, which nowadays I feel like when we talk about super wealthy people, we're talking about billionaires. But in the 1920s, he was the third wealthiest man in the world. And yes, you're right. The Wright brothers had their very first flight in the early 1900s. So this is only a little bit more than 20 years, 2 decades after the airplane was invented, essentially, in any way that could be flown for transportation rather than just novelty. So this was like a huge, huge deal. He was very wealthy and the plane was brand new. It was his pride and joy. He had a pilot, he had a pilot's mechanic, and we'll talk about all the various characters that were on this airplane in just a minute. But yeah, it's pretty crazy to think that somebody in 1928 was just flying from London to Brussels in a private plane.
I know, that's, that is luxurious today in 2025, almost 100 years later. So to think that, I can't even imagine. It must have been like a spaceship to them, like how advanced.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Like I said, it was definitely unusual for the time to have your own private airplane. But when you're third richest man in the world, different things are unlocked to you that the regular businessman of the 1920s wouldn't have had access to. But I wanted to stop here for a second because as I was thinking about like, what if our podcast was a plane? What if we're all getting on a flight to listen to some haunted in-flight entertainment, which is this episode? And then I started thinking like, what would the name of our airline be? And so I want everybody to brainstorm and leave a comment below on whatever platform you're listening to with the name of our haunted airline. And I have some ideas to get everybody started, and none of them are good.
Let's hear 'em.
The first one is JetBoo Airways instead of JetBlue, or we could be flying a Boeing instead of a Boeing.
Oh, these are terrible.
Or we could be flying a Scare Bus instead of an Airbus. Or we could be flying on Spirit Airlines. You don't even have to change anything. It's a miracle that you don't become a spirit when you fly Spirit Airlines.
Yeah. I mean, Spirit Airlines is the most haunted airline for sure, and it's aptly named.
Absolutely. Do you have any ideas, Nat, for a haunted airline?
No, I don't. Mine are, I don't. I was gonna say like Butthole Knife Air, but I was like, no, that doesn't work.
Virgin Airlines, that's pretty haunted already too.
Remember that time that you said that I said that Isaac Newton was a virgin? Maybe we could have that whole spiel is like the name of the airline. So it's like, I didn't say that Isaac Newton was a virgin airline.
Just like the longest name ever painted on the side of an airplane to the point where you can't even read what it says.
Yeah, it's just like a whole conversation.
Honestly, that would be perfect. That would be the name of our podcast's airlines for sure. Part 1, The Rise of Lowenstein. The first thing you need to know about Alfred Loewenstein is that reports on his life are often conflicting. For example, during my research, I found one newspaper that said his birthday was 1875, another said he was born in 1876, and yet another said that he was born in 1879, when in reality, Alfred was born in 1877. In another example, several newspapers incorrectly reported that Lowenstein's father was named Henry when his name was actually Bernard, and that he died when Alfred was a teenager, when in reality Bernard died when Alfred was in his 30s. And these are just 2 examples of what can happen when a story involves someone as infamous and controversial as Alfred Loewenstein. During his lifetime, he was both revered as a genius and reproached as a hard-partying playboy, depending on who was doing the talking. He was a truly polarizing figure both in life and in death, and because of this, it's sometimes hard to determine fact from fiction when parsing through different books and articles on him. But to tell the story right, we have to go back to the beginning, starting with his birth in 1877, on March 11th, in Brussels, Belgium. His father, Bernard, was a well-known German Jewish banker, and his mother, Francoise, was the daughter of a well-connected stockbroker. Born into the financial world, it's fair to say that Alfred had a head start in life. But while many Nepo babies squander away their opportunities, Alfred fully immersed himself in the banking world, taking full advantage of his family's connections. And by his early 30s, he was already a millionaire. While there are pages upon pages of scandalous newspaper articles recounting the various escapades of Alfred as an adult, relatively little is known about his upbringing. We do know that he was described as precocious and attention-seeking from a young age. One article states that at age 15, Alfred was sent to a boarding school in England where, after being reprimanded by the headmaster for some small transgression, he packed his bags in the night and escaped the school grounds, resurfacing days later in London, where he had allegedly already found himself a job and a place to live all by himself. And it was a good thing, too, because a few years later, his father would find himself in financial ruin, leaving behind a significant debt by the time that he died. A debt that was inherited by Alfred's mother, and which Alfred himself worked diligently and tirelessly to pay off by the time he was in his 30s, eventually finding his way to success on America's Wall Street. But to get to that point, Alfred had to start small. He began by partnering with a friend to create a company that helped other businesses raise money. Specifically, he and his business partner assisted companies with fundraising, helping them sell shares of stocks to wealthy investors and connecting them with banks that would lend them money. However, the majority of Alfred's wealth didn't come from this 9-to-5 grind as he established himself in Europe's financial industry. Rather, the majority of his money came from a huge gamble he took when he began investing his earnings in power and textiles after the collapse of the Belgian economy forced him to pivot from his previous career path. It is here, in these two new burgeoning industries, electricity and artificial silk, that Alfred would make the bulk of his vast fortune. Natalia, do you know much about either of these industries, electric power and artificial silk?
Artificial silk? No. I mean, I know that like making actual silk involves worms, like you have to raise insects and then you boil the insects alive, like when they go into their little silk cocoon thing. And then you take the cocoon and you unravel it and you get the silk thread and then you weave them together. And I know that it is a lengthy process. And so I'm assuming, yeah, artificial silk would kill it. It's taking a luxury and making it more accessible, and you can probably produce a lot more of it for cheaper and still be able to use it in the same way that you would silk. So yeah, I could see how that would sort of like revolutionize the fashion industry. Electricity? Wasn't there already electricity in the 20s?
So in the late 1800s and early 1900s, electric power was just starting to kind of hit the mainstream. So it had already been invented, but it hadn't really been implemented in any serious way. And especially in developing nations, there was not the infrastructure to support having electricity. So these two industries were burgeoning. You know, they were up and coming, and he saw this opportunity and was like, hell yeah, all of the money that I made on my initial venture helping companies connect with investors, now that the Belgian economy has collapsed and that's no longer an option because nobody has the money to invest and all these businesses are shutting down, let me just take all of my capital that I have and invest it in something else, something more international. That way it's not going to be as affected as my current job in Belgium is.
I mean, that makes sense. I'm just kind of jealous. Like, why didn't I think of this? Like, why wasn't I born to like extremely wealthy family? And why didn't I like not squander my opportunities and why didn't I, take a risk? I feel like every time I take a risk, it doesn't work. So it's like not fair. Why are other people risking it all? And it's just like, oh, seemed it was fine.
I do think that a lot of this was just luck. I don't want to downplay the fact that he was smart and he made smart investments. But yeah, a lot of it really does come down to luck because his dad did eventually go bankrupt, but his dad was super well respected prior to that in the financial world. And he went bankrupt because the Belgian economy collapsed. So it was sort of like not really his fault. And he died shortly thereafter. And then his mom was from a very well-connected family. Through her family's connections, he knew people. So a lot of it was luck and great timing, and part of it was smarts. But to go back to what you were saying about silk, you're right that natural silk involves production via silkworm. And yes, in traditional silk production, silkworms are typically killed by boiling or steaming their cocoons to extract the silk threads. There are some alternatives to making silk called piece silk or ahimsa silk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, where people will wait for the moth to emerge from the cocoon before extracting the silk threads. But back in the day, I mean, textiles are super important and the demand is far outweighing the supply, because when you're relying on the natural life cycle of a bug, you're just going to be limited on how much silk you can harvest. Yeah. So in the early 20th century, natural silk was luxurious, expensive, and produced in limited quantities from silkworms in Asia. Silk was highly coveted in Europe, and the demand far outweighed the supply. Seeing this economic opportunity, the textile industry began trying to find a dupe or substitute for silk, one that could be produced faster and would cost less money. Attempts at producing an artificial silk, which would later come to be known as rayon, would begin in the 1800s, right around the time that Alfred was looking to scoop up all of his earnings and place it into a new venture. As for electric power, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, electricity was just starting to transform everyday life. Cities were building electric streetlights, homes and businesses were switching from gas or oil lamps to electric lighting, and factories began moving away from steam and water power, swapping them for electric motors. In this way, Alfred was smart. His dad had gone bankrupt and left the family with an enormous debt to pay off, so failure wasn't really an option for Alfred. He simply had to make it work. So he invested half of his money in rayon and half in electricity, and the returns did not disappoint. His background in stocks and loans, combined with his smart investment decisions, eventually attracted the attention of two exceedingly wealthy men who were investing in the industrialization of Brazil. These two men consisted of an American named Fred and a Canadian named William. Fred and William were based in Canada and building tramways and electric power stations in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. They had already successfully established a monopoly on the production of electricity in Brazil. But in order to expand further, they needed more capital that just wasn't available in Canada. Somehow, they heard about the young, driven, business-savvy Alfred Loewenstein and decided to hire him on as an employee of their company, named Brazilian Traction. Alfred's role within Brazilian Traction was to find wealthy European investors and raise capital by securing loans, issuing stocks and bonds, and networking, and he was enormously successful at this. But he also developed a reputation for being ruthless and unscrupulous, willing to do just about anything to convince an investor to sign on the dotted line, even if it meant cutting corners or lying. After his sudden and suspicious disappearance in 1928, it is this hard-nosed reputation that would leave many wondering if Alfred could have made a mortal enemy. But before we take a hard look at some of the people in Alfred's life, it's time for a quick word from today's sponsors. You know what they say, April showers bring May flowers, but April wine brings a fun time. Honestly, this is probably my favorite time of year, and I've been going absolutely apeshit throwing things out, cleaning my house, donating things, and scrubbing my kitchen in particular from top to bottom. Spring cleaning means refreshing everything, including your wine collection. That's why I love my First Leaf membership. They always keep my selection fresh by sending me the perfect case of personalized wines right to my door. Whether I'm craving a light red, a crisp white, or a refreshing rosé, I'm always stocked and ready to enjoy a glass on a sunny day or after a productive evening of cleaning, because I deserve it. But my absolute favorite thing about being a First Leaf Wine Club member is that I always have the perfect bottle on hand to bring to housewarming parties, girls' brunch, potlucks, or even a BYOB restaurant. When one of my besties moved into her new apartment this month, I grabbed the perfect bottle of First Leaf Rosé out of my fridge to use for our first cheers in her new place. And getting started with First Leaf was easy. I just answered a few quick questions about my preferences, and First Leaf took care of the rest. Plus, they actually listened to my feedback, so every shipment gets better and better, perfectly matching my taste. Plus, if I get a bottle that I don't absolutely love, it's not a problem, because First Leaf has a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Enjoy the fresh vibes of spring with wine you'll love from First Leaf. Go to tryfirstleaf.com/haunted to sign up, and you'll get your first 6 hand-picked bottles for just $44.95. That's tryfirstleaf.com/haunted. tryfirstleaf.com/haunted. And now back to your regularly scheduled haunting.
Yeah. Okay. So I didn't realize rayon was artificial silk. And
I know,
whenever
isn't
I
that
see,
crazy?
yeah, that's crazy because rayon is in everything. Like this Alfred Loewenstein guy was basically the grandfather of Shein and fast fashion.
I mean, yeah, in a way, because without his money, I mean, I'm sure rayon would have eventually been developed without his money, actually, but with his money, it developed a lot faster. And even though rayon and the textile industry is still huge today, like I said, a lot of his story has to do with luck rather than skill, because yes, he made some smart investments, but it was partnering with Brazilian Traction, this company that was putting in electric infrastructure in Brazil, that really like shot him to the moon in terms of his wealth. And there are all these accounts of like, yeah, he was known for being a shady businessman, and he would meet with these investors, and he would kind of play up his affluent ties to the community, and he would sell himself as being more important or smarter than he actually was and wealthier than he actually was. And he would just straight up lie to people to get them to buy stocks and bonds and get them to sign on saying that they would be investing their money and stuff. And so he made a lot of enemies, and people simultaneously admired him and also resented him, because here's this guy that's getting richer and richer with like not being nice. You know what I mean? And we talk about this all the time. There's no such thing as an ethical billionaire. And in the 1920s, there were no billionaires. It was only millionaires. So to get to that point, you do have to be pretty ruthless.
Yeah, I mean, sales, like to do sales, you don't necessarily have to straight up lie, but you have to be really good at making a sale, because the average person only makes like a big sale or a big decision impulsively, like off of vibes. They're like, I have a good feeling about this. If they get a bad feeling about that, then they're going to wait. They're going to be like, no, I don't know. It's too risky. I'll think about it. And then you're never going to see them again. So like the average salesperson will really try to push to make a sale just then. And there's all kinds of, manipulative or creative ways to do that. Like I know with wedding dress shopping, they'll be like, if you buy this dress today before you leave, it's 30% off, but if you wait until tomorrow, you pay 100% off. Or they'll say, this deal's only today, only right now, things like that, to try to get you to feel urgency to agree to something. And so I can kind of see that yeah, people really don't like pushy salesmen, but at the same time, it sounds like he had his shit together. I mean, like he wasn't just a straight up scammer. He ended up actually being successful. Now, was that on the backs of, people who were doing the majority of the grunt work for him? Maybe. I don't know. I'm just learning about this story right now. I don't want to be too judgmental right off the bat, but I don't know. That's the argument. I see it all the time. Like people are saying, oh, rich people are rich because they figured out how to like not have to pay taxes, or they're smart. They figured out how to not have to do this, not have to do that. And the people who have made their money that way are usually like, well, anyone can do it. And yeah, and then it just like spurns into this whole conversation about like, no, because like you had privileges and I didn't have privileges, and it's like stuff that doesn't have to do with anything right now. I just don't want people to get triggered and think that I don't already know that. And I'm just trying to make a podcast, guys. I'm trying to be interesting about something that I don't even know about. I don't know shit about finances. I don't know fuck all about this guy. I just heard about him. I'm trying to provide commentary on something I have no idea. I'm not an expert in this at all. It's actually quite a miracle that I've been able to talk about this subject for this long.
Nat fighting invisible comments right now for 20 minutes. But I'm glad you said that you don't understand the investment world, because I don't either. And when I was learning about, because I was trying to figure out what made him shady. You know, like, why are all these articles or books about his life alluding to the fact that he was shady? And it took a while for me to find any examples. And then when I found them, I was like, well, I don't understand any of these. So, like, that probably explains why nobody bothered to say what exactly it was that he was doing that was shady. But I guess one of the things he did was, at the time, having anonymous investments was not legal. But he somehow found a loophole where he was like, hey, you can buy a stock or bond without your name being attached to it. Maybe because it was in Latin America. I don't know. And so these super rich people were buying these stocks and bonds and able to like hide that they owned them, I guess, was part of the issue. And that was like illegal and frowned upon. I don't know, because I was not alive in the 1920s, but he seems to think that it was a loophole and that that was fine. And then other things he would do is, I guess he would like overstate what the returns were going to be when he knew that the returns were not going to be that good. So people would sign on, and but technically, you know, it's not lying as long as you say that in good faith I thought that it was going to give you this return. But I guess the like lowdown was that he knew the return wasn't going to be that good.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
I guess, yeah. I don't know if the word would be insider trading, but kind of like that. It's like he has maybe it is insider trading. Like he has information that gives him an advantage in buying or selling stocks and bonds.
The sense that I was getting from reading, I read so many articles, dude. I read a 340-page book, okay?
Why?
Because he's a complicated guy. Like, he's complex. And I needed to understand. I just like get hung up on these stupid things, like these tiny things that nobody else is ever going to care about. And then the big stuff that people do care about, like someone will ask a question about it and I'll be like, I don't know. I was spent like 5 days trying to figure out the financial world. And so that's all I can tell you about. Basically, I guess he was just doing a bunch of stuff that was frowned upon and kind of shady. Part 2, the disappearance. Now that we have a decent background on the man, it's time to fast forward to the fateful day in question, July 4th, 1928, the day that Alfred Loewenstein vanished into thin air. Literally, because air is thinner when you fly. On that fateful day, Alfred pulled up to Croydon Airport in London, accompanied by 6 other people split up amongst 2 high-class black limousines. This group consisted of Alfred himself, the plane mechanic, Robert Little, his pilot, Donald Drew, his male secretary, Arthur Hodgson, his valet, Fred Baxter, and his 2 female stenographers, Eileen Clark and Paula Biddlon. Descriptions of these individuals vary somewhat depending on the source, but the general consensus seems to be the following. When Alfred stepped onto the tarmac from the comfort of his polished black limo, he was described as being of medium height with a stocky build and slicked down graying hair. Author Bill Fletcher wrote in his book on Lowenstein that, quote, his features were powerful rather than handsome. He had thick lips, a heavy nose, and dark eyes deep set in a swarthy face. Not an attractive man, but a personality to be reckoned with, end quote.
What does swarthy mean?
I've thought about this before, and I don't know that I've ever Googled it, but in my mind, when I hear swarthy, I'm thinking of somebody that, like, doesn't have clear skin. I don't know. Let me look. What does swarthy mean? Swarthy means...
I thought it was a slur.
It means tanned, it says.
Okay, yeah.
He's Belgian, though, so he's German and Belgian, so I don't know
Okay. So yeah, like surfer vibe, maybe. I thought it meant a slur. So I thought it was like calling somebody dark skinned, but like in an offensive way. I
I
don't know
mean,
why.
I don't think it's meant to be a compliment, but I don't think it's. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe it is racist, but I know that word from 30 Rock, and Tina Fey's character is always described as being swarthy, and she's super
Oh,
pale. So
right.
I don't know. I've always just thought it meant kind of like you're not clear complected, if that makes sense. Like looking at your skin, it's not flawless or like smooth
Oh.
looking.
Like you
But
have blemishes, you have hyperpigmentation from like
per-
the sun.
perhaps, yeah.
Um,
That's kind of how I've always thought of it. It does say tanned on the Webster's dictionary, but I've only heard it used to describe white people. I think it's kind of like when people say, "Oh, he was tall, dark, and handsome," and you're like, "Oh, was he like Latin?" And then they're like, "No, he was actually from the Caucasus Mountains." Like, "Oh, all right." So what you're really saying is he had dark hair and brown eyes. Like, gotcha. Okay.
huh.
All right. So he's swarthy. He's not very attractive, but he comes off as being very powerful. Like you look at him and you're like, this is a no nonsense kind of swarthy man.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Robert Little was described as being one of the finest aircraft mechanics in Europe. Donald Drew was described as one of the finest and most experienced private pilots in all of Europe. Fred Baxter, Lowenstein's valet, was described as being small in stature like a horse jockey. And Arthur Hodgson, Lowenstein's male secretary, was described as being taller, in his mid-30s, and Alfred's closest confidant. On this particular day, he was clad in a smart pinstripe suit, sporting a neatly trimmed mustache and holding an umbrella in his hand. Eileen Clark and Paula Biddalon were unfortunately not described in any articles other than to say that they were women and stenographers. Which just
What is
seems
a
like so
stenographer?
typical. A stenographer is like shorthand. So, like if you're in court and there's somebody typing, it's like somebody
Yes.
that can write in shorthand. They're not literally typing out every single word by the letter. It's like different sounds have different symbols so that they can type super fast. But in this time in history, these women weren't typing. Well, at least I don't think they were, because they're described as having they always had their steno pads with them and a pencil.
What are they doing? Like, here's what I'm not understanding is there like a meeting happening on the plane that they have to take down information?
Okay, I'm super glad that you asked this, actually, because we're about to learn that not only was this a brand new aircraft, and not only was it a private plane, which, as you pointed out earlier, is already kind of rare, but this plane had actually been completely customized by Lowenstein so that he could conduct meetings in it. So it had a desk, it had a super nice leather plush office chair bolted into the ground facing everybody else's chairs, and that's where he would sit. And he even had invested in soundproofing so that the pilots wouldn't overhear what businesses he was conducting. And he was even known, in one of the books I read, it said that it was not unusual for him to take stenographers with him on these trips, and if they fell asleep, he would shake them awake and be like, "You gotta write down this idea I have," he just was all about business all of the time.
I'm just imagining. I mean, this is for sure slander because but he's not alive, so whatever. I'm just for sure imagining that he's high on some sort of stimulants, right? Like everyone I know who's coming up with business ideas constantly is manic, and so I'm wondering if this is him too. But it's one of those rare instances where your mania is actually working out, and which makes you even more manic because people are like, no. You're acting erratically, you need to chill out. And then you make $1 billion in 1920s currency, and you're like, yeah, actually you can shut the fuck up because I was right.
But you're right, though. That is how he is described in a lot of articles. People say, you couldn't tell him anything. If somebody else tried to give a suggestion, he'd argue with them just for the sake of arguing. And he'd be like, no, my idea is best, and actually, fuck your idea. We're not going to follow it. And so he was just constantly making enemies because he rubbed people the wrong way. He wasn't good at taking feedback. You couldn't tell him anything. If he got an idea in his head, even if it was a really bad idea. And he had many very bad ideas. Like, it didn't matter. He was just going to do it anyway because he'd already made the decision that he had thought it through and was correct.
Yeah, he's stubborn. Yeah.
He's stubborn.
Yeah. He sounds very manic. Being manic is very fun, but like when people aren't self-aware enough to know that they're in a state of like mania, it can be very frustrating to deal with them. Because it's like, I don't have the energy right now to tell you why you're acting like this, and you are like operating your brain at 200%, and I have 3.5 brain cells right now, so it's like, I know you're incorrect, but I don't know how to explain it because I'm not manic.
When you have to like teach somebody that's set in their ways and they're like, well, I've been doing it this way for 50 years and so I'm just going to keep doing it, and you're like, right, I understand that, but technology evolves, and like I'm trying to explain to you that you're making the wrong decision, and they're just like, nope, not doing it. Like, that's the impression of what I get about Alfred Loewenstein, because at the time that he disappeared, he's in his 50s and he's super stubborn. And even up-and-coming businessmen are trying to tell him, like, hey, the economy doesn't work like that anymore. Or like, hey, this investment that you're about to make is actually a bad idea and it's going to fail because that's not the way the world works anymore. And he's just like, I put trams in Brazil. I know what I'm doing. So as they boarded his private monoplane, which was a Fokker F7A3M, which apparently is like important to note. I guess this was like a good plane for the time. I'll send you some pictures in a little bit, but it's a Fokker F7A3M. The pilot commented that the weather was perfect for flying and that they should expect to arrive at Heron Airport in Brussels in no more than 2 hours' time. Evening was falling, and the last rays of sunshine were making their way behind the surrounding buildings as a clear velvet blue sky beamed down. As the party settled into their seats, Eileen and Paula made sure to have their stenographers' notebooks and pencils at the ready in case their boss wanted them to dictate anything, as he often did while traveling. If there was one thing everyone knew about Alfred, it's that he was crazy about work, to the point that he had even modified his plane so that it had a desk and drawers installed to store business papers and extra soundproofing to drown out the noise from the plane's 3 engines. The pilot and plane's mechanics settled into their seats behind a glass partition that separated them from the rest of the passengers. The glass partition was extra thick to prevent anyone in the cockpit from listening in on Alfred's business dealings. Alfred was extremely proud of his brand new plane, which was an enormous luxury and status symbol of the time. Although today it would likely be considered small and uncomfortable. The plane weighed in at around 6,000 pounds and measured just over 40 feet long. For comparison, Mark Zuckerberg, our current third richest man in the world, has a private jet that measures over twice as long as that, at about 109 feet. But remember, in 1928, only 2 decades had passed since the Wright brothers' historic flight. So Alfred's monoplane was the pinnacle of luxury for the time. Prior to boarding the plane, Lowenstein excused himself from the party and made his way into the terminal to make a phone call. This call was overheard by an airline pilot named Captain Bob McIntosh, who would later say that Lowenstein had been talking to a Canadian financial magnate named Sir Herbert Holt, and that the two seemed to be organizing a business dinner for the following week. Which, side note, like, why is this random pilot just listening in on this guy's phone call?
Yeah, I don't understand that. Can you read that part again?
Yes, so prior to boarding the plane himself, Lowenstein excused himself from the party. So the party is in the plane, they're getting situated. The stenographers have their steno pads and graphite. His valet and his secretary are getting buckled in. The pilot and mechanic are doing the last minute checks. But before they're scheduled to take off, Lowenstein's like, hey, excuse me, I'm going to go back inside the terminal and I'm going to make a phone call. Because remember, cell phones don't exist during this time. It's not like they had a plane phone. They just have a 2-way radio in the cockpit. That's it. And he needs to call a business associate, this guy named Sir Herbert Holt, to set up a business dinner meeting with him for the following week. And there's this other airplane pilot named Captain Bob McIntosh who's just listening in on this call. And so later, when Alfred disappears, because we already know he's about to disappear any second now from the plane, this is like a famous guy. Alfred Alfred's like a celebrity basically because he's the third richest. Like I said, he's the equivalent of today's Mark Zuckerberg. So him going missing is about to be huge news, and journalists are all over this story. Like they want to know all the details. So they find this guy, Bob McIntosh, who was working a shift as a pilot that day. And he says he happened to be in the terminal while Lowenstein went to make his call. And he recognized Lowenstein because Lowenstein is like this he's like Mark Zuckerberg. And so he's like, oh shit, what's Lowenstein up to? And he's listening in on this call. And he figures out that the call is between Sir Herbert Holt, who's another famous Canadian financial magnate, and that they're talking about organizing a business dinner.
Okay, I understand.
So Lowenstein returned from his call after a few short minutes, and just after 6 p.m., his monoplane took to the skies. Later, curious onlookers who had noticed Lowenstein had stayed to watch his plane take off and reported that he had smiled and waved at them through his plane window as the plane sped down the runway for takeoff. Now, do you believe these witnesses? Because that seems like so random.
I mean, the guy sounds like he had a crazy ego, so like maybe he would do that. Maybe he would be looking out of the window, waving at onlookers, like, hey, look at me in my private plane. I don't know. Like, it seems like it would be really hard to make eye contact with somebody when they're in a plane taking off, but maybe planes used to be slower. I don't know.
Yeah, they definitely did used to be slower, but I just think it's weird to imagine that you're in the terminal and you're like, it's Alfred Loewenstein! Oh my God, with his brand new 40-foot monoplane, the pinnacle of luxury. Look at him. Look at him. Oh, he's looking at us. He's waving. I made eye contact with Alfred Loewenstein as he was speeding down the runway at 100 miles an hour. Like, it just...
it seems pretty fake. It sounds like someone trying to make themselves relevant by saying that they've had some sort of celebrity sighting.
That's my opinion, is I feel like whenever something happens to a celebrity, people come out of the woodwork and they'll be like, I saw him that day and he did look sad, or I saw him that day and he was smiling and waving at me from his monoplane, or I did see him that day and he was on an important business call. Like, it kind of just seems like people trying to insert themselves into an exciting narrative, but who knows? This was reported on far and wide that he was smiling and waving at people and making eye contact, so maybe it's true. The takeoff went smoothly and was uneventful, and as the plane reached its cruising altitude of 4,000 feet and its cruising speed of 126 miles per hour, the flight was shaping up to be a quick journey with no turbulence. It's important to note that the flight path taken this day was not unusual in any way. In fact, it had been taken by Lowenstein dozens of times over the years. The flight from London to Brussels was known to be short and only required a quick pass over the coast of Dover and the English Channel before landing promptly in Belgium. In modern times, this flight only takes 1 hour. But in the 1920s, it could take anywhere from 2 to 3 hours, depending on the type of plane used and the weather conditions. Unlike his usual custom of dictating business dealings to his stenographers, Lowenstein settled into a book for the first part of his flight. And after the plane sailed over the coast of Dover and made its way over the waters of the English Channel, Alfred excused himself to use the restroom. The flight was already almost over, but 10 minutes later, Alfred still hadn't returned from the restroom. Baxter and Hodgson, Alfred's valet and secretary, made eye contact with each other, with Hodgson telling Baxter that he should go check to make sure Alfred didn't need any help. Baxter approached the restroom and knocked on the door. There was no reply. He knocked again. Still no reply. Next, he tried the door handle, but the door was locked from the inside. Worried that his employer may be suffering from a medical emergency, he yelled that he was going to break down the door if Alfred didn't respond to him immediately. But still, there was no reply. Swiftly, Baxter plunged his shoulders into the door, popping it open and crashing into an empty bathroom.
Wait, he disappeared on the plane?
Yep.
What?
Dude, this is why I read so many sources, because this is a juicy story. He goes to the bathroom, shuts the door to the bathroom, just doesn't come back, and when they open the door to the bathroom, it's empty.
What? So are all these people on the plane lying? Like, did they murder him and like dispose of his body somewhere, and then that they're just making up this story? Or did he, yeah, like I'm wondering all of the different theories. Like, I wonder if he told the people that he was getting on the plane, but he didn't.
You're having the exact questions that the public is going to have when this starts to be publicized. And this goes viral globally. So people internationally are really interested in this story, and there's a ton of theories about what happened. So you're on the right track because you've already named a couple of them. But back in the bathroom, Baxter looks around bewildered, with cold sweat running down his face. He couldn't believe it. The toilet and sink looked completely normal, there was no sign of distress, and it was as if Alfred had simply walked into the bathroom and then ceased to exist. He screamed to Hodgson for help, and soon the plane was in total chaos. Even though there was nowhere for Alfred to be hiding in the small 40-foot monoplane, the frightened employees tore everything apart, trying beyond all hope to find Lowenstein. But it quickly became evident that he was nowhere. Hodgson snatched the notebook and pencil from one of the stenographers and ran to the glass partition separating him from the pilots. He banged hard on the glass. When the mechanic turned around, he could see a clearly panicked Hodgson screaming something. But because the glass was soundproofed, he couldn't make out what was being said. By this time, the plane had crossed over open water and was nearing the French coast. The startled pilot wondered what could be so important when the flight was already almost over. In desperation, Hodgson scrawled something on the steno pad and pressed it against the glass. The note simply read, "Captain, gone." These two simple words would set in motion a series of unfortunate decisions and a bungled police investigation that would result in one of the most confusing unsolved disappearances of the 20th century. But before we can get into the aftermath of Lowenstein's Vanishing Act, it's time for another quick sponsor break. Roses are red, violets are blue. This Mother's Day, get your mom a new do. Life is stressful. Busy schedules, postpartum, menopause, alien abductions, the hitchhiker effect. If you're going through it, so is your hair. And thinning and shedding affects more than just the physical. In fact, 2 in 3 women say that the way that their hair looks can completely change how they feel about themselves. With NUTRAFOL's award-winning line of hair growth supplements, you can feel confident in your hair and focus on what matters most to you. Finding ghosts, living your life. NUTRAFOL is the #1 dermatologist-recommended hair growth supplement brand, trusted by over 1.5 million people. Million, like a millionaire, like Alfred Loewenstein. Do you see how I'm seamlessly weaving this ad into the fabric of today's episode? That's why this Mother's Day, NUTRAFOL makes the perfect gift. There's something for every mom on your list. The postpartum formula is great for women in the first year after giving birth. The Women's Balance formula is perfect for women 45 and up. And if you're a dumb vegan like me, NUTRAFOL even has a women's vegan supplement, which is the formula that I take. I've worked very hard my entire life to try to make sure that my self-worth isn't tied to my appearance. So when my hair started shedding like crazy in 2020, I was shocked by how much it affected my mental health. I was trying everything I could think of to make my hair healthier, and I still use NUTRAFOL's women's vegan formula today. This Mother's Day, consider giving the gift of NUTRAFOL, the best-selling hair growth supplement. Whether you're gifting it to yourself or a loved one, NUTRAFOL's offering our listeners $10 off any order. Enjoy free shipping when you subscribe. Go to NUTRAFOL.com and enter the promo code HAUNTEDGIFT. That's NUTRAFOL.com, spelled NUTRAFOL.com, promo code HAUNTEDGIFT. That's NUTRAFOL.com, promo code HAUNTEDGIFT. And now back to your regularly scheduled haunting.
I know you're going to tell me more of this story, but right now my mind, like my first thought is just that the people on the plane killed him, like they pushed him out or something. And we never find his body because it disappeared or, was eaten by animals or something like that. I can't imagine where he's missing. But also, isn't there like a modern movie that's the same plot? Like there's people on a plane and they go missing on the plane. I can't remember what it is. It's basically that there's someone who goes missing on a plane. Hold on, let me look and see what it's called because maybe it's this.
The only thing I can think of is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where they're doing the Wade Boggs challenge and they're trying to drink 20 beers before their plane lands. And so they keep like hopping down into the baggage claim area to grab beers from their checked luggage. And like they're not supposed to be down there because they're just passengers, but they figure out how to get down into the luggage area. But the interesting thing about this plane is that it's very small. So there literally is nowhere for him to hide. You walk in and there's a bathroom, the cockpit, which is separated by a glass partition and only has room for these two guys. It's not spacious at all. It's not like a modern day cockpit. And the desk and the chairs. Like that's it. That's the only things in this plane. There is no luggage holding area that you can access from the body of the plane. So there's nowhere for him to be. And that's what makes this so crazy because they all feel like they're going insane. Like, let's suspend our disbelief because I know we're already kind of going down the path of like, oh, well, maybe these people killed him, which is a possibility. But let's take that off the table and just say, like, if you were in that position and somebody went to the bathroom and then was just gone, I feel like you would think you were going insane. Or that, I don't know, I feel like just me, I would be like, we all died and this is purgatory and that's why, and he like got raptured into heaven. I don't know. I feel like I would be having crazy thoughts because the idea of something like that happening seems impossible.
Yeah, like I wonder, I don't know, if Jeff Bezos went missing or something, we, in a similar situation, we would all just assume he had invented some new technology that we didn't have access to. Like I would assume, oh, so they figured out time travel. Okay, so they figured out, how to instantly, like he jumpered over something. I don't know.
Right,
because you kind of feel like people who are that crazy wealthy are like above death. Like, I can't imagine something happening to Mark Zuckerberg because I feel like he would just have his memories and conscious implanted in a new human.
Yeah, no, I definitely see what you mean. Yeah, it's always really strange when super wealthy people die, and it usually spins out into conspiracy theories because we can't believe that they've died. It's like unheard of.
Speaking of which, that movie is called Flight Plan with Jodie Foster. Her daughter goes missing on a plane, and she has to prove her sanity because people don't believe her. And she's like, my daughter went missing on this flight, and she's like, doesn't want them to land the plane until they find her.
Oh, shit. Wow. Okay, guys, new movie club opportunity here. I really want to see this movie. Part 3, The Aftermath. At this point, the occupants of the monoplane had come to terms with the unthinkable. Alfred was gone. Now, what I haven't told you yet is that this tiny restroom had 2 doors, one that led back into the plane and one that led to the outside of the plane. That meant that if Alfred wasn't inside the plane, he must have somehow fallen out, tumbling 4,000 feet down to the icy, unforgiving waters of the Atlantic Ocean below.
And as would he open the window, the door, though?
That's the question. That's why a lot of people don't think that that's what happened, because how would you possibly mistake that door for the door that goes back into the plane? And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the differences between the doors in a bit, but they did not look the same, to be clear. Like it would be very difficult to mix that up.
That would suck so bad. You open that door and you fall out and you're just totally conscious, knowing that you made such a stupid mistake.
For 4,000 feet.
Hate that.
I mean, pretty horrifying. So, as I said before the ad break, by this time in the flight, the plane was nearing the coast of France, and the logical thing for the pilot to do, and what he should have done if he was following aviation regulations, was to land at the nearest airport, an airfield known as Saint-Anglever that was just 5 minutes away from the plane's current position. But for some unknown reason, in the first of many strange decisions, the pilot, Donald Drew, decided not to follow protocol. Instead, he decided to turn the plane around and land on the nearest beach that he saw, conducting a risky maneuver as he brought the plane down for a landing on wet sand near the ocean.
What? Why? He thinks they're gonna find him?
This is insane. When I read this, I almost didn't believe it, because why would you do? Can you imagine a pilot making an emergency landing on wet sand? Like, that's like worst case scenario. Like, the plane is going down and you have no other options. But even then, I think you're supposed to attempt a water landing, but there was nothing wrong with the plane. The plane was totally fine. So it made no sense for him to do this. And like I said earlier, he was described as being one of the best and most sought after private plane pilots. And private planes, like we already said, it's already like a small pool to pull from, right? And so he was very well known, and he would fly small planes for all of these super wealthy people. And nobody ever knew him to be anything other than perfectly professional, very safe, following the letter of the law at all times. And so the fact that he made this emergency landing, for lack of a better term, on wet sand on a beach is really, really strange. Like, he was only 5 minutes away from an airport that would have had police that could have helped him immediately.
Something's not adding up. I don't know what it is, but something is afoot. Although, also, it just started like thundering. So if you guys hear thunder, let it add to the spookiness.
Wow, I love it. No sooner had the 6 remaining occupants jumped down from the plane onto the sand than they were greeted by a band of furious French soldiers who took them forcibly at gunpoint into custody to explain themselves. All this because Drew had unknowingly landed in French military territory. According to the military records of the encounter, the plane touched down at approximately 7:29 p.m., and the crew was contacted by soldiers only 6 minutes later. A few moments after that, the 2 women and 4 men were ushered into an interrogation room to be questioned by the man in charge, a Frenchman named Lieutenant Marquet. Marquet reported that immediately upon the plane being spotted over restricted airspace, he had called the nearby police station at Dunkirk. While waiting for the police to arrive, he began questioning the intruders about what on earth they were doing, landing a private plane on a military beach. The 6 passengers were completely shaken during this interrogation. Marquet's notes say that the 2 women, Eileen and Paula, wouldn't stop sobbing. The pilot, Drew, appeared to be in emotionless shock and just kept repeating that opening the door to the outside of the plane while in the air was impossible. Hodgson, the secretary, was sweating excessively, and the valet, Baxter, was stuttering and his teeth were chattering. Overall, no useful information could be retrieved from the group until 30 minutes into the interrogation, when they finally said the name of the man who had fallen out of the plane: Alfred Loewenstein. What's odd about this is, in one account, Marquet says that the group had no trouble telling him that their employer had fallen out of the plane, but that they didn't want to tell him the name of their employer for some reason. And it took 30 minutes to convince them to give him the man's name. Apparently, one of the secretaries, Eileen, had insisted that she could not give him Alfred's name because they, quote, didn't have the authority to do so. And it was Hodgson, Alfred's closest confidant, who finally eventually gave up Lowenstein's name. Do you find that weird that presumably the only option is that their employer has fallen out of the plane into the ocean, is probably dead, but there's a chance he might still be alive. Presumably they made this emergency landing because they were trying to get to him sooner by landing closer to the ocean. So why wouldn't you give the name of the missing person immediately to someone who can help? Like, this is the French military. They have planes, they have boats, there's military police. Like, they could have launched an immediate effort to help, presumably, you know, but instead they delay everything.
I kind of get it because they're dealing with a celebrity, right? So it's kind of like when Marilyn Monroe died. Nobody wanted to be the person who was like, Marilyn Monroe is dead, because they were all, you know, they're so used to taking orders from the celebrity that they almost don't know how to what to do without them, because they can't ask them because they're dead and be like, hey, are you ready to be dead now? You know, like, should we tell people you're dead, or should we wait? Like, everyone's wondering who's going to be the first in command now, because before it was Lowenstein and now he's not there. And so you have the stenographers and the pilots and the mechanics, and nobody wants to take the lead on it because, first of all, they're probably in shock and don't even want to believe that it's happened. And second of all, because they're so used to taking orders from him that I'm sure they're like, I don't even know how to navigate this right now. Yeah, and maybe also they didn't want it to get out yet, like that he was gone because they knew it would like be breaking news.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what I would do in this situation. I mean, we all have the advantage of like playing Monday quarterback or whatever they say, where you're like, well, I would have done this, but like really none of us knows what we would have done in the situation. But to me, it does seem a little bit strange because I understand the stenographers maybe not wanting to get involved because they are the people that are lowest on the totem pole in this situation. But I do think it's weird that Hodgson is basically Alfred's best friend, and he is eventually the one that gives up Alfred's name. He doesn't do it immediately. I don't know, it just seems a little bit weird to me. But despite the strange circumstances, the lieutenant would later tell the newspaper The Daily Express that he believed the 6 employees' story, saying, "Believe me, it could not have been play acting. It would have been impossible for those on the aircraft to have acted as they did if Mr. Lowenstein had not met with some terrible fate." The 2 typists were in tears. The valet was greatly affected, his teeth chattered with fright, and perspiration poured from the brow of the secretary. It was obvious to me that something dreadful had happened. End quote. Eventually, the police arrived on scene, and in the end, no one was arrested. Inspector Bonnet, the highest-ranking member of the police who had arrived at the military outpost, even gave permission for Drew and Little, the pilot and mechanic, to fly the monoplane to the nearest airport without any further inspection at all. Even stranger, the French police did not go looking for Alfred. After reviewing maps of the approximate location the crew had been flying over at the time Lowenstein had excused himself to use the bathroom, French authorities decided it was out of their jurisdiction. But when British police were informed of the missing millionaire, they too determined that since the vanishing happened over international waters, they weren't in charge either. The Belgians said the same, and so in the end, the task of searching for Alfred was non-existent. The search was over before it even began, and the only way to find Alfred now was going to be if his body washed up on a beach or if a fisherman found him by happenstance. To make matters worse, according to Belgian law, without definitive proof that Lowenstein was indeed dead in the form of his corpse, no death certificate could be issued and his assets were effectively frozen. Now, Lowenstein's wife and son, along with his various business partners, colleagues, and employees, were not only left grieving and reeling from the confusing circumstances of what was presumed to have been a gruesome death, but they were also left in a race against time to unfreeze the assets, or else they could lose their homes, jobs, and livelihoods. To incentivize someone, anyone, to look for her husband, Lowenstein's wife told French authorities and the news that she would be offering a handsome reward for the recovery of her husband's body. Armed with this new information, fishermen quickly went to work hoping to be the first to find the corpse. For 2 straight days, a tugboat called the Lady Brassey scanned the frigid waters in search of Lowenstein. But when weather took a turn and a storm rolled in, they were forced to abandon their search. Meanwhile, Madeleine Lowenstein wasn't letting her husband's missing body prevent her from pursuing a death certificate. Immediately, she made an appointment to meet with a judge. According to witnesses, she never once had hope that her husband might be alive, nor did she question much the theory that he may have fallen out from the monoplane. In fact, if not for her traditional black mourning attire, you may not even have known that her husband had died at all. Her singular goal from day one seemed to be to get her husband's death certificate and move on with her life.
Well, I know, okay, 2 things. One, my first question is, why freeze assets if somebody's not dead? That would be weird. That's like trying to freeze my husband's assets because he's like not at my house. You know, that's weird. I feel like I don't understand that. Second of all, I kind of see her position because you said this guy had a reputation for being stubborn, for being kind of a dick, for like not listening to anyone. So I'm sure their marriage probably wasn't great. Like anytime I've ever had relationships that were terrible, it was always because it was like stubborn, you couldn't compromise on anything. And so if she was trapped in a marriage like that, maybe she was kind of like, oh, this is great. Now I'm rich and this guy is gone. Mission accomplished.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely could have been that. We don't know much about their marriage, but it definitely sounds like it wasn't very good. It seemed like they didn't really spend a lot of time together. There were rumors that they slept in different bedrooms. He had 3 mansions, and so sometimes he would be at one mansion by himself and she would be in another one. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem weird to me that she might not care for him very much. But what is weird is that she doesn't even try to look for him. I don't know. I feel like if someone just told me, hey, your husband went missing on the routine flight he was taking, I would be like, I'm sorry, what? Like, where is the plane? Show me this plane. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean he went missing? But she kind of just jumps straight to, I need to unfreeze his money. Like you said, you didn't really understand why they did that. So they did that because there was no proof that he was dead. So all the judge knows, all Belgian law cares about is where is the person. And if the person goes missing, it could be that they've been kidnapped, it could be that they've fallen to foul play, or it could be that they're just missing and they don't want to talk to their wife, you know? And so in order to transfer the assets to her, there would need to be proof that either he was giving her permission or that he was dead. But she never once is trying to find him alive. She's just like, hey, fisherman, I'll give you some money. You find his body. When I have access to his funds, I'll pay you a reward, essentially. So
yeah, I mean, or maybe she's in on it in a way, not like maliciously, but maybe he's faking his death for some reason to like get out of owing money or something he knows about that no one else knows about. And so she knows that he jumped out of the plane and had like an escape route or whatever. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what some people definitely were wondering during this time, because she was wearing traditional mourning attire, which was customary, like dressed all in black, but she didn't seem that sad. She just seemed mostly focused on getting the money. But like I said, the Belgian court system did not make issuing a death certificate easy in circumstances without a body. Madeline dragged into court all 6 of the witnesses who had been with her husband at the time of his disappearance, hoping that if a judge would just listen to their accounts, he would decide to give Madeline what she wanted. It is during this inquest that the eyewitness accounts of July 4th would begin to change. Pilot Donald Drew and mechanic Robert Little showed up to the tribunal with sketches of the aircraft in hand and proceeded to convince the judge that it would be extremely easy for Alfred to have opened the door to outside the aircraft by himself, undetected, with no help, and either jump or fall out to his death. The judge, having no experience with flying himself, trusted the opinion of these 2 aviation experts, and, in a rare exception to the rules, declared that Alfred was deceased. However, in another twist, he still refused to issue the death certificate without the body. Exasperated, Madeline was now relying completely on the efforts of strange fishermen motivated by reward money to find her husband's body and unfreeze his assets. Part 4. The investigation. On Thursday, July 19th, 1928, at around 4:20 p.m., a corpse was found bobbing in the Atlantic Ocean 10 miles off of France's coast. The body was discovered face down, wearing nothing but a pair of silk underpants, silk socks, a watch, and leather shoes. And it was so beaten and corroded that the smell was unbearable. Jean-Marie Beaugrand was the skipper of the fishing vessel that found the corpse, and he, along with his first mate Louis Legris, hoisted the body over the side of the fishing boat for a better look. Inspecting the putrid and decomposing body closer, there wasn't enough of a face left to make a positive identification. But that's when Jean-Marie spotted the watch, still attached to the corpse's body. Carefully removing the watch and flipping it over, he read the engraved words, Alfred Loewenstein, 35 Rue de la Science, Brussels, etched deeply into the metal plate. Excited that he was about to get a hefty sum in prize money, Jean-Marie ordered his crew back to port. But the crew was so overcome by the stench of the body that they threatened a mutiny if Jean-Marie didn't put it back in the ocean. Thinking on his feet, the skipper wrapped the corpse in a sail with a long length of rope tied to it and dumped it back in the ocean with the other end of the rope attached to the boat. In this way, the disintegrating body of Alfred Loewenstein was unceremoniously towed back to shore.
It was really him? They don't really know. It could have been someone planted that body and put the watch on it, because it seems I don't know.
Weird. So remember, this is before the days of DNA. This body is so decomposed that they can't make a positive identification just by looking at it. But yeah, you're right. Very convenient that there just happens to be a watch attached to him when seemingly most of the rest of his clothes are gone.
Very weird.
Once safely ashore, the body was then taken to the morgue, where a police surgeon began the autopsy of what was left of the body. The skipper waited patiently as police phoned Madeleine Lowenstein, who showed up almost immediately immediately and paid the boat captain his reward, all without looking at the body herself. Madeline called in a private doctor with strict orders for him to do a private, sealed autopsy. And as that was going on, she rushed back to the judge to get the death certificate and then unfroze her husband's funds. Author Bill Fletcher wrote of the autopsy, quote, "In the weeks that followed, a steady dribble of information flowed from the Paris laboratory where the two doctors seemed to be spending an unconscionable amount of time on the study of Alfred's entrails. They announced at an early stage that they had found a massive wound in his stomach, probably caused by contact with a rock, and that every bone in his body was broken by the force of the impact." End quote. The autopsy was finally completed on September 10th, 1928, and some vague findings were published by the New York Times. Essentially, the two doctors who had examined his body determined that it was probably Alfred's and that he was alive when he fell from the plane and died from blunt force trauma of hitting the water after falling from a height of 4,000 feet. The report further concluded that the death was likely an accident and that he had a, quote, normal amount of alcohol in his stomach at the time of his death. While all this may have seemed normal to an outsider, it didn't sit right with Lowenstein's closest friends, all of whom knew that Lowenstein didn't drink. The statements of the witnesses aboard the monoplane also didn't sit right with those who knew Alfred best. Alfred famously hated reading and would go as far as paying other people to read things aloud to him. Yet all the witnesses said that he had been quietly reading a book before he excused himself to use the restroom. Hounded by reporters, the witnesses' accounts of July 4th began to be looked at with a skeptical eye. Remember how Madeline had dragged everyone in front of the judge while trying to get her husband's death certificate before his body was found? Well, you may remember that the pilot and mechanic told the judge that it would have been super easy to open the door to the plane and fall out by accident. But aviation experts pushed back, calling that story ludicrous and false. Opening a door at an elevation of 4,000 feet, with wind whipping by the door at over 126 miles per hour, plus the extra force of the plane's engines pushing wind directly in front of the door, would have made opening the plane's door while in the air nearly impossible. Once the monoplane made its way back to England, the UK Air Ministry's chief inspector examined the plane and found all doors to be in perfect working order, making an accidental opening seem highly unlikely. Besides that, even if the man had somehow gotten the door open, aviation experts reported that it would have changed the air pressure inside the plane dramatically, causing everyone on board to notice the abrupt change. In an interview for the Toronto Daily Mail, one aviation expert from the Royal Air Force remarked, quote, "Any person wishing to get out of the door, which opens towards the motors, would have to push a piece of woodwork, roughly 10 square feet in area, against a slipstream of 120 plus miles an hour, assisted by the backwash of two 150 horsepower motors. The backwash of these alone is enough to knock a man down when standing on the ground. And even if a man could get it open, a super strong man, as soon as the pressure was released, the door would slam shut. His body would be caught and held fast in the closing door. Furthermore, as soon as the outside door was opened even the slightest bit, everyone inside the plane would have been aware of it. A blast of wind would have blown throughout the cabin. It is impossible, supposing a man did leap from the machine, that the passengers inside the cabin should not know something had happened." End quote. But according to the witness statements, they hadn't felt any blast of wind or any pressure change, and the only reason Hodgson had even gotten up to check on his employer was because he had been in the restroom for too long. And then there was the issue of why the plane's pilot had decided to break protocol and land on a beach of all places. In one interview for The Times, pilot Drew told reporters that he had tried to double back to search the waters for Alfred. But in another interview with the New York Times that he gave the same day as the first interview, pilot Drew said that he had never tried searching for Alfred because he knew a fall from that height would have been fatal. In an interview with yet another newspaper, the pilot remarked that only a very strong person would have been able to open the plane's door. But a few days later, he had given that testimony in front of the judge where he said it would have been super easy to open the door. To make matters more confusing, the Dutch Fokker Aircraft Company decided to conduct their own experiments by trying to replicate the accident with the assistance of two aircraft mechanics. The mechanics were sent up 4,000 feet inside of the monoplane and asked to try to open the door. The results showed that it was impossible for one man to open the door by himself. It would have taken 2, maybe even 3 super strong people to get the door open enough for someone to fall or jump out. These types of experiments would continue, all having the same result.
Wow. yeah, I mean, I keep thinking like there's got to be some secret going on, right? Like maybe the plane landed on that French island because they were actually letting him get off on the plane, or maybe he was hiding money somewhere, like physical money. Like maybe he had assets on the plane, gold or something, I don't know, and he was burying it somewhere or I don't know. It just seems like, yeah, you wouldn't be able to open the door. And the whole thing about the alcohol in his stomach, I'm like, well, if he didn't drink, maybe he started drinking and then he just didn't know how to hold his alcohol and he was like, I'm just gonna open this door on the plane. I don't know. You do crazy shit when you're drunk, especially if you're not used to alcohol. I don't know, man. I feel in my heart that it is something strange afoot. And I don't know if I trust that corpse belonged to him. I don't know. Maybe it's, oh, I just had a new theory unlocked. Okay. Maybe the wife and everyone is in on it, and he did disappear for whatever reason, but the fishermen, not understanding that there is no corpse to be found because he did not fall into the ocean and is actually still alive somewhere, just found a random corpse and then got a watch and had it engraved with Alfred's name and address on it and put it on him and was like, oh yeah, also the body smelled so bad that we had to put it in a sail and tug it back behind the boat. So if it looks real fucked up, that's why. Not because we're trying to hide the identity of this corpse, because it is not actually Alfred.
I think that's not a super far-fetched theory. I think it makes just as much sense as any other theory, because it seems like a lot of the stuff that the people that were inside the plane have been saying isn't really adding up at this point. But meanwhile, back on land, it was time for a funeral. Part 5, The Funeral. On July 21st, 1928, Alfred Loewenstein's body was finally laid to rest in the Brussels cemetery in Evere, within a tomb belonging to his wife's family. Not much is known about his marriage to his wife, other than her name, Madeline, and the fact that she had come from an old money family. She and Alfred had wed in 1908 when he was 31 years old. Their marriage has often been described in different sources as one likely of convenience and not love. Alfred benefited from his wife's family name and connections, and in turn, he outfitted her in the latest fashions and an upscale lifestyle, including 3 mansions that generated almost $500,000 in expenses each month. Rumors abounded that the couple hardly ever saw each other between Alfred's demanding work life and Madeline's insistence that they sleep in separate bedrooms. But whatever their arrangement, it seemed to work just fine for them throughout their 20-year marriage. But now, at age 51, Alfred was gone. Before his funeral, before even his body was found, Madeline had visited the monoplane, parked at Saint-Angleterre at the time, hoping to find some sort of clue about her husband's last moments. It was there that she allegedly found her husband's collar and necktie. Picking up these 2 items in her hand before slamming shut the door to the plane, Madeline reportedly said, "Sell it. I don't ever wish to see this plane again." Gathering her husband's 4 suitcases, she got in her car and had her driver spirit her away to a hotel where rumors state that a private doctor made frequent appearances to her room to administer a cocktail of drugs.
His cocktail?
Look, nothing makes me hornier than when my husband dies in a tragic accident. That's all I'm saying.
If he would have 3 mansions that generated $500,000 every month and planes and all this stuff, look, I could make any fucking marriage work for that. Yeah. Like, I don't give a shit what, you could be a fucking Shrek and like, we're gonna be happy in love. Like, that's aphrodisiac for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I don't understand. Like, maybe their marriage, had some problems or whatever, but I don't think that there's any problems you can't overcome with...
By 3 mansions?
Yeah. Come on. You don't even have to see him in 3 mansions. Like, he could be trying to chase you down for whatever, and you just disappear, and you're at the other mansion. Oh, sorry, the driver drove me. We don't have cell phones, so, like, you couldn't get a hold of me. I'm sorry. Now I'm gonna go do some cocaine with this doctor, and I'll see you in 3 to 6 weeks. Love you. you.
But honestly, it kind of seems like that's what their relationship was. And as his expensive casket was carried to its final resting place, curious onlookers outside the cemetery gates clamored to catch a glimpse of the business tycoon's funeral procession. But much to their surprise, rather than seeing a grieving widow or somber children weeping amongst a wealthy crowd, the only attendees of Lowenstein's funeral appeared to be just 17 men, dressed all in black, looking silently on. Eerily, though the casket was draped in expensive flower arrangements of orchids and wreaths of violets, seemingly no one from Lowenstein's family had come to say goodbye, not even his wife. In his book, The Man Who Fell from the Sky, author Bill Fletcher Jr. described Alfred's grave thusly, quote, "His tomb, covered with a plain black slab of polished marble and occupying the space of 3 graves, had been purchased in perpetuity. The hearse, crushed to a halt beside the open tomb. A few perfunctory prayers from the cemetery's resident priest, and the coffin was lowered into the vault. The mourners departed, the slab was replaced, and the remainder of the flowers were heaped haphazardly upon the graves on either side, to fade and rot in the sunshine. In the weeks that followed, no mason came to carve the name of the famous man on the marble slab. Nor would they ever come. Alfred Loewenstein had been tidily consigned to the obscurity of an unmarked grave." End quote.
Because he's not really in there. And I bet he cooked up this crazy plan for whatever reason you're going to tell me when the theories come through. He cooked up a crazy plan. He's going to fake his death. He told all of his employers, all of these people, hey, you got to go along with this story. That's why they were so nervous when they were talking to the French military authorities. That's why they landed on that island, was to make so that they didn't make it back to England, so that they wouldn't have to answer to English law, so that it was in international waters or whatever. I bet he wasn't even on the plane. That's why those witnesses were like, yeah, he smiled and waved at us, because they needed witnesses to see this fake guy go. And that's why none of his family is going to the funeral, because they're all like, we told you this was a fucking stupid idea. I'm not going to go pretend to be sad at your fake funeral. Like, I already have to do everything else for you in this life. And you're the bane of my existence, other than this beautiful mansion we're living in right now. And so they're not going to go. And then that's why it was all for show. I bet those guys in the black outfits were just like paid actors or something.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And then that's why they didn't ever put his name on the grave, because it was all for show.
I mean, it is super strange. Like we said earlier, even if they didn't have a great relationship, to not at least attend the funeral seems super harsh. And then beyond that, okay, let's say you're too high on your doctor's dick and cocaine, and so you don't want to go to your husband's funeral, right? Like, you just physically, you can't even make it there. To not engrave his name on the stone? I mean, come on. I've never heard of something like that. That's like reserved for unclaimed bodies, or, yeah, like random bodies that are found that you can't attach an identity to. So to your point, does that mean that this body that was found is an unidentified body that there is no name attached to, and that's why she's like, I don't want to put anyone's name on this body. Like, I don't want to be involved with this.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
But besides leaving behind a supposedly grieving widow, Alfred also left behind a son named Robert, who in happier times had spent hundreds of hours rearing the family's impressive collection of prize-winning racehorses at the indoor riding school Alfred had built on the family's property in England. As any young man would, he was having trouble grappling with his father's unexpected demise. That is, until reports began surfacing that Lowenstein might not be dead at all. One stunning interview published by the media just days after the disappearance comes from a fisherman who had been out with his boat in the area Lowenstein had gone missing. The fisherman reported that he had witnessed a man parachuting from the monoplane into the English Channel before a fancy yacht raced towards the man, zooming off with the unknown skydiver on board. Next episode, we'll be going through the rumors, gossip, conspiracies, and theories over what really happened to Alfred Loewenstein on July 4th, 1928.
Wow. Wow.
That's right, Haunties. This is a two-parter. So we're going to be going very in-depth on some of these theories, and some of them are absolutely insane.
It's as I always said, this whole episode, he's not really dead. This is an inside job of some sort. Yeah, but yeah, it's an inside job. And that's why everyone is super nervous on the plane. It's just like I painted it out for you guys a few paragraphs ago. That is what I stand by. That is what I believe in. Now, I don't know why he did this. Maybe so he could run off with some other girl or some other partner or something because he didn't want to damage the relationship he was having with his current wife because he needs her clout for whatever reason, you know?
Yeah, her family name. I guess the family name was the Missons, and he was buried at their funeral, at their like crypt. So I guess they were very wealthy because they owned an entire part of this cemetery where all their family members were buried after they died. So yeah, I mean, she had the connections.
Yeah. Yeah. Allie, if you were super wealthy, would you have a cemetery? Would you bury your family in a cemetery or would you have like a cemetery on your land?
I think I would have everyone buried in a cemetery. But you know what's interesting is I actually was thinking about this the other day, just about like the concepts of cemeteries, because I'm like, okay, you own a cemetery. It's your business. You make money based on people dying and buying a plot of land and paying for a funeral and a casket and whatever. Okay, I mean, what happens when the cemetery is full and there's no more room for new bodies? Do you just start digging up old bodies? Do you start burying people on top of other people? Because then, you know what I mean? Like, how would your business continue? How would you make money after all the plots are full?
I don't know. That's a great question. I feel like I've looked into this before and this could be wrong, but this is just a theory, guys. I think don't like cemeteries regularly get sold like hundreds of years after the last living relative is dead or whatever, and then they just turn it into a Disney World or something? Like, don't we always say like, oh, this is built on an old burial ground?
I mean, yeah, that's true. There's a park in Ventura that is called the Old Cemetery or something, and there's all these graves underneath the lawn, but they don't really have any markers anymore. You know, like you can look at old records and figure out whose grave more or less you're standing on, but I don't think they really have any markers. And I went on a ghost tour there once for a friend's birthday, and they had us use the dowsing rods to like walk around and see if we could make contact with a ghost. And I was like, even at the time, I was like, this is so strange. Like, there's just people who paid money to be buried here, and now this is a park? Like, what a ripoff. I mean, I guess they don't care because they're dead, but like, that just seems like shady, like a shady business dealing.
I don't know, man. I know there's people who work in funeral homes or like morticians or whatever, and I know it's like a normal job and it's like not that spooky apparently, but I don't know. It seems real spooky to me. Like, you know, they try like so hard to just, oh yeah, like I just embalm people. It's super scientific. There's nothing weird about it. I'm just down there with all the bodies at night and listening to this podcast. Like, I know we have some people who like listen to Let's Get Haunted that work in with dead bodies. And it doesn't seem like they're freaked out by it, but I'm just like, you really are haunted. I could never be in a room alone with dead bodies. Like, I would just be certain that it's going to get reanimated, you know?
Yeah, I don't have the constitution to be around a rotting corpse that's been dragged behind a boat for several miles. But I'm glad somebody's able to do it, because somebody's got to do it, but it's not going to be me.
Yeah. Wow, great episode. I'm so excited to hear the rest of this episode. Wow.
Well, Haunties, like I said, we will be continuing this story in part 2, episode 216. But don't forget that next week is listener stories. So you're actually going to have to wait 2 weeks to hear the conclusion of this riveting tale. Thank you so much for listening. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And don't forget to leave a comment saying what you think the name of our haunted airline should be, because I feel like that's the next doodle I'm going to do, is just a super haunted airplane with Nat and I as the captain and mechanic flying over the English Channel.
Would you be the captain or the mechanic?
I feel like you're better at assembling things than I am.
Because I put together like those Amazon soundproofing screen things. That's not that you can't do it. You just don't. You're like, oh, if I don't do it, she'll do this. But
that's not true at all.
Bye.
Are you ready to do the sign off for this week's episode?
BRB, gonna go mourn my not dead billionaire 1920s father while I ride these horses in our equestrian farm he built for me.
Bye.
Bye.
Welcome to the closing credits for episode 215. This month, we would love to give a very warm, heartfelt thank you to our Patreon donors who donated to us in the month of February 2025, letters G through M. If you'd like to become a donor and hear your name shouted out on a future episode, head over to patreon.com/Let's Get Haunted, where you will not only get a shout out, but you'll also get access to episode extras, mini-sodes, personal hauntings, live streams, and much, much more. This week, we'd love to thank Gabby H, Gathy with a G, Jeffrey M, Ghost of 7-Eleven, Grace M, Grandma Painter, Haley C, Haley L, Holly L, Hannah RK, Haley G, Haley A, Hexylvania Snow, Hugo A, Ileana RN, Ileana RN, Inky Pop Art, It's Kelsifer, Yvonne L, Ivan L, Jackie L, Jacob, JDKP, Jameet, Jamie F, Jamie P, Jasmine B, Jasmine C, J M, Jamie L, Jen M, Jenna M, Jenna S, Jennifer C, Jenny B, Jenny Squiddy, Jessie, Joey and Jessie, Joanna H, Joanna H, Joaquin E, Jocelyn, Johan S, Johan S, Jordan F, Jordan L, Jordan B, Jose L. Krampus, Jose P, Jules the Ghoul again, Julia C, Julia M, Julie B, Julie B, Julie C, Juliet H, Justin M, Justine D, Kate M, Karen H, Karen K, Karina C, Karina C, Carly K, Carly M, Kat, Kat and Alice the Malice, Catherine P, Katie Cat, Katie T, K to the Win, Kayla M, Kayla P, aka Kayak, Keese P, Kelsey, Kelsey K, Kelsey L, Kelsey H, Kendra, Kimberly F, Kindred and Amber, Kinsley M, Kittenish Kate, Corky M, Corey with a K, Kristen K, Lacey M, Laura the Lauren, Lauren B, Lori, Lowry, Elsie Fitz, Ladybug 979, Leah R 1991, Leanna BC, Lena, Lena, Lexitronic, Lil Dilda, Lily Bones, Lily Bell, Lily Silly, Lindsay M, Lindsay S, Lisa Bone, Lisa H, Lisa H, Lisa ML, Luxury Guinea Pigs, Mad Nej, Madeline, Maddie P, Madison E, Madison M, Maja L, Maja L, Mac, McKenna P, Maria O, Marina W, Mario A, Maris G, Mari G, Marissa G, Marty F, Mary A, Mateo NL, Matthew L, Matthew M, Maddie C, Maddie Joe, Max M, Mazen G, Meg R, Mega Lantern, Megan M, Megan N, Mega Red, Megan D, Melissa G, Melissa H, Melissa S, Mellow Mellow 82, Mercy DM, Metal Pineapple, Michael, Michael B, Michael S, Michael T, Mike S, Mikey BDX7, Minnie W, Mo, Molly, Molly P, Monica H, Monica R, Mother of Frogs, Mumble, and Maya H. Woo, 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 woo. Pew, 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 pew. I haven't done the shout out lasers in a hot minute, so there are some space lasers for you all. I hope you guys know how much it means to us when you donate to us on Patreon. I know that you guys are under no obligation to do it, and it just makes me so happy and makes my heart feel so full every time I'm reading off these names. Many of these names I recognize as longtime donors, and some of them I recognize as brand new donors. And it's always so exciting, whether it's somebody who's been with us since the beginning, or if it's somebody that just started yesterday. It's the same level of excitement every single time I get to read these names, and I am so, so thankful for each and every one of you. And now it's time for the secret password of the week that you will comment on the photo dump for this episode at Let's Get Haunted on Instagram. For those of you who don't know, each time you successfully comment the secret password on the photo dump, you get entered into an end of the year raffle. And if you win that raffle, you win a prize. It's usually merch. Sometimes it's exclusively designed merch that we make just for the raffle. And sometimes it's extra merch that we've acquired throughout the years. And so you've just got to take the chance and make sure you enter every single time you hear the secret password. The secret password of the week is don't drop the baby. See you guys next week. Bye.